Gotcha. So the one thing that we talked about that we're going to get into is your last, I don't mission. Would you call it? Yeah, mission event. Your last um, time overseas in Afghanistan was a very notable mission, and I want you to kind of walk the audience through the background, lay the baseline. What was the mission? Why were you there? How did you find yourself there? Let's just start with that.
So the mission was a hostage rescue and for I'll leave it to the people to sort of dig into that more if they're interested in that. But from my perspective, um, it was an interesting story for me because it was my first opportunity to go on a hostage rescue. It was also happening while I was on my terminal leave, which is weird. So how do I explain this? So with no ego, it's kind of like the feeling, it kind of became a joke among the team too, like, hey, you're on terminal leave, you're getting out of the Navy, but we have this thing and we need you. It wasn't that at all, obviously, but there was a reason for it, is because, it was a very surprise spin up for that mission. We actually did leave, very fast for that one. There wasn't a lot of time to hang around and get ready for it, which was pretty typical for those types of missions in the years like previous to that. So we kind of gotten used to it, but we left really quickly and we had, I was a recce guy. So we, sniper recce type guy. So we had most of our planners, which are recce guys, out on different trips training, right? Trying to stay current. So they weren't going to be able to get back fast enough to blow out for this op. So I had a troop chief who essentially called me up. My locker was cleaned out. I had turned everything in except for a pair of night vision goggles, my primary weapon, and I had all my gear still ready for those missions for that period of standby on our cycle. So knowing that my troop chief essentially called me up, and I was really upset because I was in the team just doing emails. They started to spin up, and I go, of course, they get to do this thing right when I go on terminal leave and I'm getting out of the Navy. So I'm back in my neighborhood. I'm running a couple of miles, and I come back and my phone's blowing up. It's my troop chief. I call him back. He says, hey, what are the chances that you'll come in here and help us plan for this thing? I said, well, of course I'll come in and help plan for this thing. And then sort of joking, I just said, and then, well, if I plan, do I get to go? So he paused for a second. He said, actually, hold on a second. And he went to talk to the officers, and they came back on the phone. He's like, yeah, you're current on everything. I had done a jump trip when I came back just to sort of do a fun thing on my way out, but that allowed me to be current. So we needed a tandem guy. We needed a couple tandem guys, and all of those, the guys that had that qual were not going to be able to make it back in time. So we organized sort of the chalk loads. Yeah, so we blew out for this hostage rescue. I got to jump in a tandem and be sort of the point man.
Real quick, for the viewers who hear these words like tandem, who have no idea what that means,
Yeah, yeah.
when you say that, what does that mean?
There's a certain number of us that are qualified for jumpers that need to come with us for a hey-ho that are unqualified to jump with the team. So we have to have a certain number of guys that can tandem somebody in. So like a medic or a comms person or somebody outside of the main
So,
team.
so they're strapped to you, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So I
Got
jumped,
it.
guy strapped to me.
Got it. Yep. Perfect. Keep going.
Yep. So we did these missions. We did a couple of them. We ended up not getting the hostages for various reasons, but there was, like an elaborate tunnel system, which fast forward when we actually were able to recover those hostages, um, some of their recollection of what happened was pretty interesting. They actually heard us all above them as they were sort of stuffed down by these guys down into the tunnels. So it was really kind of strange that they were being moved around down there while we were busy clearing the village. So unfortunately, it was not a successful hostage rescue, but for me, it was the last mission. It was like a last hoorah. And some other things happened on that that were very important to me, especially getting out of the Navy afterwards, and going through that. And maybe I could talk about that later, but um, there was some things that happened that were important to me because, people, it's cool to talk about the hostage rescue, all of the sort of external details of that. But something happened on that mission that was that really affected me deeply that I didn't really think about enough while I was in. And I think that might be part of the sort of collective ego or sort of ability to put those things away that has to be within all of us in order for it to work, to sort of function as a team through some of those experiences. And one of the things that happened was, this was the Haqqani network. So they were known to rig explosives around for, some of the situations where they had taken hostages in the past. So they were notorious for some of those kind of tactics. We were briefed up on this stuff, and there was a lot of intel towards this. And as we made our way into the target, there was some activity going on. There were some bad guys moving around, but we were able to sneak up on the target undetected. There was some sort of soft compromise before that. There's a lot of early warning network stuff around there, and we were in an area that hadn't been really operated in for a while. And so, we could pick that apart, but there could have been various reasons, anything from hearing the aircraft, miles away to just small noises or something stirred them up to the point where at the very last minute they were able to stuff the hostages down into a tunnel system. And when we got there, the beds were still warm. There was evidence that they were there very recently. So that was a frustrating thing for all of us to deal with. But the other thing that happened was there were 5 males in the courtyard, and our tactics were to try to minimize breaching just because there's so much dust. So you would essentially blind yourselves out. But because it was a hostage rescue with very specific rules of engagement, we decided that we were going to do that, and just sort of take on a little bit more risk in order to get in there quickly. So we did do that. Myself and another teammate of mine made a very deliberate decision to eliminate the males that were in that courtyard. I think it turned out later that there were some weapons under the blankets and stuff like that. But it would have been very risky for the breach to go off and for all of the operators to get dusted out and not knowing what could happen. So we essentially did the right thing by eliminating any risk whatsoever to the assaulters, which is our job as recce guys. But it turns out that 2 of the males were actually, and we found that out later. They were probably, I don't know, maybe ish. And so, these kind of things happen, especially with those kind of rules of engagement. We don't ever obviously train for that. So maybe I think we'll talk about that later with one of your questions about critics towards, some of the wartime stuff. But that really, there was nothing that affected me the way that did from any of my experiences. We can talk about PTSD and different kind of stuff like that, but I never really regretted things. I never really regretted decisions that I made. And I don't really, aside from teammates being lost, that those kind of things never really affected me deeply. I wasn't the guy that had like nightmares and these kind of typical things that people might think about PTSD, but that really affected me, not in the moment, but later when I got out of the Navy. And I really had to sort of detach from that life to figure out a new purpose and purpose in life, which is really a deep struggle for a lot of guys. And I only understood it when it became my turn for that. But that incident, then suddenly after I was out, I did start having a very specific nightmare, and it was that I had killed those those younger males, and then they sort of rolled over, and every time in the dream they rolled over and it was like my own kids' faces. So it was this feeling like I essentially like had killed my own kids, and some sort of like guilt, traumatic feeling associated with that experience. um
Even though you had done exactly what you had to do for that mission.
Yeah, exactly. It was for sure the right thing to do. We circled up as a team afterwards and discussed it, and really there was no issues with it according to what was going on with what the rules of engagement were, the reasons why. I mean, me and my teammate were able to account for every shot that we took, but it still affected me in some way, pretty deeply after that. So I realized later that it had more to do with just unhealed trauma and things that I had going on from even before the Navy, back from childhood and stuff like that. And that's really healing myself from the inside and coming to terms with who I was and what my purpose now was after the Navy. And just sort of clearing myself from addictions and toxic habits, and trying to reconnect with my family after all those years of being gone, and my wife. uh Once that all happened, I started to realize those things, those dreams and those nightmares went away. So I think what the experience allowed me to do really was just to be more mindful of of moments with people that I love, with my kids, in a way that I never was before. So I realized that it was the right decision to get out of the Navy at that point while they were still young, and they still didn't really have memories of me being gone like 270 days a year.
Right.
And now it's like every day I just feel, sometimes I even cry, a little bit when I'm hanging out with them, or when we're sort of laying down at the end of the day. And I'm just infinitely more mindful of moments with my boys. And so I think that's what's come out of it, honestly, with the
Man,
that experience.
Chris, I got to tell you, and I know we talked about this off screen previously, but that is to me is just a regular guy, just a listener, no military experience. That experience, the first time I heard it and right now, it's unbelievably profound. And I think it's important that you understand that the viewers watching this and myself, that's how we view it. That's how people are going to view that when they hear that. Because that's a story 99.999% of people never understand. They will have no idea what it's like to go through that. And here you are courageously talking about the ups, the downs. I mean, it's nothing short of stunning. And I hope that the appreciation from the viewers is not lost on you, because I promise you it is definitely there.
Thank you. Yeah, there's when I think back on different stories, different things that happened, extortion 17 was a big thing. Like anytime bad things happen, it's profoundly affecting each operator inside, but we all find a way to get through it. And when I think back on all those times, um, it's it's sort of black and white when you're there, right? When you're in it. And just like anything else, um, things aren't black and white. And so I think that each guy has a profound experience that they keep within themselves. And that's just one memory that I have to sort of explain how that works. There's so many books on the book on killing, and that describe, different psychologies associated with that kind of work. But I think we're now in a time where it's starting to be a little bit of a shift in the special forces community and stuff, where guys are actually able to discuss and sort of do it in a therapeutic way, describe how that actually affected them, inside.
And do you have one thing that you look back on when you look at kind of the way that you mentally processed it, the way that you kind of came back? Like, was there one thing you did that really helped the most, that maybe someone who's listening to this right now, they have their own traumatic experience from war, and maybe they're struggling to find that one thing to get them over the hump? Was there one thing for you that really kind of gave you that extra little push?
Yeah, for me, it was just that transition out really became one of the most difficult times in my life, even more so than anything that happened in my career. And I didn't understand that. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to get out and it's going to be, reintegrating back into society or whatever. And it's obviously starting to become more noticeable from sort of the general public or people per se, that it's a real thing that each guy has to go through, and it's going to be different for each guy. And the catalyst for what they do with that, or the choices they make, like, because you're gonna, in my opinion, in my experience from this is, and it took me a while, it took me 5-6 years to figure this out. Some guys it's faster, some guys it's not, and some guys never do figure it out, and then unfortunately they, it can, that's why we have such a big problem with veteran suicide,
Right.
right? And I went through a program that really helped me figure that out. But you come to a point where it's kind of a fork in the road, and you can kind of make the choice to continue to sort of devolve in your ego and your attachment to all of that sort of darkness and guilt and shame and those things, or to sort of face all of your demons and all of those things for what they are, confront them, and then make a choice to accept it, and then better yourself after that, each and every day, to the point that you can actually fulfill your purpose in life and your fullest potential. And so, I feel like at this point I'm just on it's a journey each day, trying to better myself and feel good and happy. And so I'm super grateful that I went through all of that struggle and was able to find the a way to make that choice. Right?
I mean, it's just unbelievably jarring to me sitting here listening to this, and I know people watching this are going to say the same thing and text me the same thing. And one of the things that sticks out to me when I talk to guys like you, talk to tier one guys, whether it's in the Army, the Navy, whatever it might be, is you guys have unfortunately had to witness maybe the worst savagery in modern day civilization, if you even want to call it civilization over that. I don't know. That's up for people to debate. Do you think the public has an understanding of what we're dealing with when it comes to these extremist people, or do you think they see something on the news, turn it off, and go right back to watching whatever else they were watching?
I try not to generalize too much, but yeah, I for sure think that with all of the advent of social media and media and just all of this barrage of information, it sort of desensitizes us to the truth of things sometimes. And then we start to generalize, we start to make judgments. And for sure, I think that it got to a point where, when we cover something so much, it was like Afghanistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iraq, Iraq for so many years that people, our attention spans, it's like maybe we all have a little bit of ADHD because of technology, right? It's just constantly coming in. And so, yeah, for sure, people, I think, see it and they maybe react to it for an instant and they go, wow, that's crazy. And then they move on to whatever the next, distracting thing is that doesn't matter so much. So,
For you, so obviously I interviewed Bill Rapier, who is a larger than life figure, I think, in the special operations community. He's a living legend. If you guys can watch that, find it out there, it's great. He said in that interview that for him, it was never personal. Like being in the Navy, being deployed was never personal at all. It was this is the mission. This is what we're going to do. It's not personal to me. That's what he said. I'm not saying that. Obviously, I wasn't there. For
yeah.
you, for you, was it always looked at like this is my job? I'm just doing a job, or were there points in your 13-year career where you're like, hey, this is personal to me. Like this is a personal situation now.
Yeah, no, I think that his mindset for that is absolutely correct. It's we select guys based off of that. It can't be anything personal. It's like I hate to quote movies too much, but that movie Black Hawk Down, I always remember that moment where he's like, how do you do this? And he's like, it's just war. And that also comes into play when I think about critics of war, is like, things happen, good and bad, there's so much context behind every situation. But, the point being that it's war, right? So if you have that mindset, which is the correct thing, like it's not personal, then I think that it functions better that
Right.
way as a unit, right? And every unit is different, but um, each guy's different. I think the struggle with taking things personally comes more into play with your reputation among your teammates and
Mhm.
sort of judgments on each other. Cause like those teams they're beautiful with the camaraderie and the brotherhood. And then when things aren't going so well, or when there's not that much combat repetition, you start to sort of judge each other's reputations based off of other things besides combat. And it can also be equally uh, dark as it is beautiful, where guys just sort of jump on each other. And that's really the moment where I think that it would have helped me personally to not take anything personal or take things personal at any point. Right. And
That's
I try to think that in my life now at this point. If I just don't take anything personal, I'm fine.
that's
Even if somebody means it personally, it just if it doesn't affect me if I don't take it personally, and
right.
I just function more efficiently. Uh,
Absolutely. And if someone else wants to be negative, that's their problem,
Nothing to do
right?
with me. Yeah.
Right, that's their problem. Now, you did just bring up something that I